There is just one element that held the band back, and that was always money. None of us came from the bank of mummy and daddy. We could never be able to afford to run the band.
And I think the fact I didn't have a van did severely limit the band's potential.
25 years on, and we're still trying to fathom why it didn't happen for us.
Are you serious? You're blaming it all on the lack of a van?
Like thousands of others, I spent my late teens and early 20s in a band. We were called the Monkey Run, and we were going to release life-affirming records, tour the world, and have existential discourses with the NME. It all began with a 7-inch single. Back then, the self-funded, self-recorded and self-manufactured 7-inch was both a rite of passage and a potential golden ticket. We were all at it.
The 7-inch single was the be-all and end-all for us, I think, as, you know, kids who were into pop music. It's like somebody from the 1800s explained to us, you know, how important the spinning jenny was to the textile industry.
I suppose nowadays you can do it electronically. It's not, you don't have this physical thing which was tangible in your hand.
There's something very warming to know that I was of the generation that made 7 inches.
Every musical hero we ever had released a 7-inch single, and this put you on a par with them.
DIY made it possible for bands to enjoy making whatever music they wanted to make, whatever music they could make, and share it on their own terms.
Chuck Warner has compiled hundreds of these 7-inch singles on CDs for his Mesthetics record label over in the United States.
It was spirited and unedited, and above all, it was unself-conscious. Some folks were accomplished musicians, but a lot of them also couldn't play or sing a note, and either way, it worked out.
Down the years, I've often wondered what happened to the dreamers, like me, who invested so much time and hope into these 7-inch singles. Was it a one-off statement to the world, or the start of an enduring commitment to their muse? And what happened to them anyway? What did life have in store? It's a very wet, cloudy, horrible, murky day in Huddersfield, but I'm at one of my favourite places. Quite excited here because I'm about to enter Vinyl Tap. As you enter the store at street level, it's very much a traditional record shop selling CDs and new releases, but as you make your way downstairs, you're immediately hit with that enticing smell of mustiness and Calagas fumes, and suddenly you're in a huge warehouse cum cave, absolutely full of vinyl. And down here I'm about to meet a man who is lucky enough to work here every day of his life, a bloke called Phil Casey.
This is what's known as our pound room.
Right.
Let all the DJs and the crate diggers, as they're well happily known, to come and have a look through and feed their habit. They love nothing more than finding a room like this full of vinyl.
I'm here today looking for 7-inch singles.
Right.
There's quite a few behind us here. How many have you got in the shop?
Well, we're into thousands. There's probably 30,000, something like that, and that changes all the time.
Do you sense the work that's gone into them and the ambience?
Oh, indeed, because I've been involved on both sides of it. I can remember sat in bedrooms folding sleeves up, and it was very exciting doing your own stuff and getting it out on record and getting into your local record shop.
I'm going to look through the store today, and I'm hoping to find maybe 4 or 5 singles that lead me to a great story. Do you think I've got a good chance of that actually happening?
You've got a very good chance of that happening here. We have a wide range of singles, especially in the new wave area of the shop, of which people will have self-financed themselves, so you should find some, yes.
What do you think will happen to the people I'm going to find this morning?
I don't know. A lot of them have moved on to be solicitors or accountants. The punks, as they were, they are now the solicitors or the white-collar workers. I find, yeah. The rockers don't change much, apart from they've cut their hair.
Well, you've got long hair still and a couple of earrings in there.
Yeah, well, I'm a rocker through and through, see.
One thing that stands out about the bands is the way they still love what they did back then, even the folks who are mainstream professionals now.
Chuck Warner reckons that those of us who made our own are more likely to have retained some pride in our work.
With any other genre, half the musicians nowadays want nothing to do with the way they sounded 30 years ago. But lots of band members are still making music, and they're still enjoying it, even if they've still never been paid for a gig. more than anything else, I suspect that's because the stakes were so low back then, and the risks were low. And because no one's hearts got broken and hardly anybody burnt out, the music has stayed fun.
Until the age of the internet, most of the people behind these records would have been untraceable, their stories untold. Matthew Kleinman is now designer for Sony PlayStation, but in 1979 he was a member of The Method. I picked out their single because I like the simplicity of the sleeve, a black and white shot of Matthew bathed in shadow, playing his saxophone in a shop doorway.
The music scene then was a way of making friends. We practice regularly, I think, and you slowly get better at what you do, and then you can play and make some other friends, and if you're lucky, meet a nice girl or a nice boy or whatever. To be honest, I would advise anyone now, if you want to have some fun, just pick up a guitar, work hard at it for a couple of months, and then as soon as you possibly can, find a friend and start playing together. We used to do, as a bit of a joke in our set, a Pink Panther theme cover, just for a bit of a laugh. But someone said, we should do it as a single, so we did that out with another track, Chances, which was on the other side.
This quirky, whimsical approach was a feature of many DIY records.
Instead of writing lyrics that were vague and general enough for broad appeal, DIY gave bands a certain freedom to think small and write about things like the local counselor, the youth club, or school assignments, favorite foods, or how they'd been mistreated by a particular club owner. And the other thing is they always got to name names. DIY also meant recording quickly, often as soon as the songs were written, so there was no fatigue or boredom with the material. It didn't have any time to get weighed down with improved guitar solos, or the big thing is somebody else's idea about how it should be arranged and produced.
How many copies did you sell?
I think my mother bought one and my uncle bought another, and I don't know how you managed to get a hold of one, but I think there were, I don't know how many sold, but not many.
At least Matthew became a footnote in the career of a performer who became extremely successful. Among his circle of friends, and someone with who The Method often played concerts, was Adam Ant.
He actually gave us a support gig at the Marquee one time, which was completely packed with people wanting to listen to Adam and the Ants, not to us. And when we finished, it was raining cans and bottles and things on top of us, which was quite funny. At that time, you just had to see the energy of Adam. When you saw a gig, you could immediately tell this is going to be brilliant, because it was just so powerful.
How do you placate the old Matthew that was into autonomy and DIY and punk-fired?
I'm a little cog in the machine, but it's slightly creative. Do a lot of drawing and painting, so you need to have 1,000 also-rans to have one Picasso. So if we were the 1,000 that helped somebody else do well, that's worth it.
Do you really mean that? Are you not cut up, bitter?
It would be nice. It would be, of course it would have been lovely to, but I didn't make a penny out of it. But we had years of every week rehearsing once or twice a week and playing 2 or 3 times a month. And those were great times and great fun.
Are you telling me that when you saw Adam on top of the pops, on every bedroom wall up and down the country, you didn't have a little frisson of "could have been me"?
A little bit, but I wasn't Adam and the Ant. I mean, he was super talented. He was a genius.
Most of the singles I found were by groups, with few people having the conviction to announce themselves as solo performers. Brendan Kidulis was a rare exception. He told me he was working at a bistro in Nottingham in the late 1970s when the idea formed to release a record.
They happily let me sing a little bit as well. And the restaurant manager, Adam Gray, liked one of the songs that I'd written, and he suggested that we make a record of it. So we went down to North London and cut the 2 sides of the single, Rusty Love and One First Kiss, in 8 hours at Pathway Studios. which was a studio frequented by the likes of Madness and Dire Straits at the time. It was an 8-track basic studio.
Unfortunately, the single's DIY status didn't spare it a critical pounding.
Got a terrible review in the Record Mirror.
What did they say about it?
They grouped it together with 4 records and said they were among the 4 worst records he'd ever heard in his life. And this guy can't hold a note.
How did that feel?
Well, yeah, one was a bit dejected for about an evening, I think, but the next day, It's about the only review I've ever had that I didn't keep. And I thought, well, I'll have to go out and buy this in the interest of balance. Somebody had lent me their Record Mirror, but I never actually got round to buying a copy. I still don't have one.
Were you forewarned there was going to be a bad review in there?
No. I think it was just sort of left in the vicinity for me to find. But you have to be used to that. If you tell a dog off, his tail goes down for a little while, but he's soon back to. So now, sort of in a way, I didn't even take it personally. It was just a knockback. Did
you tell your parents and your friends?
I think my friends knew before I did.
Did you appear in the music press ever again?
I can't remember having been in the music press since then. No, not as far as I can remember. No. Once I fell in with a girl.
Brendan survived the criticism and has been a professional musician all his life, playing in bars, hotels and on ferries. This year he's putting out an album which will contain a version of Rusty Love, the song he released 35 years ago. One single I couldn't resist was by a band from my hometown of Rochdale, Tractor. Listed on the sleeve of Average Man's Hero was Tony Crabtree, a blind musician I often used to see around town when I was growing up. Tony's manager was his friend, Chris Hewitt.
Tony used to play guitar behind his head like Hendrix, and he could do Hendrix's voice. He could mimic anybody's voice.
Was he completely blind?
Completely blind, yeah. He lost his sight at about age 2 or something like that, and he had to have he had plastic eyes, which kids used to ask him to take out so they could see what was behind them.
In the mid-1970s, Crabtree secured a £37,000 advance from Virgin Records, about 10 times the average annual salary for the time. He began recording sessions in London, but soon became homesick.
And at that point, Tony Crabtree rang up Brian Eastwood, the Rochdale guitar maker, and just said, "I'm in London, I'm fed up, I don't want this, I want to come back to Rochdale." And someone went down and picked him up, and he came back and sat in his house in Wardle, selling off the equipment like he sold a Fender Rhodes that he'd bought for the band, for his band that didn't exist.
Just to be clear here, Chris, he walked out on that major deal.
Yeah. And the VAT were sending him letters to say, "You've had all this money off Virgin Records, what have you done with the money because you owe VAT on it?"
Back home, Tony joined Tractor, who had once been signed to John Peel's Dandelion Records. The single, Average Man's Hero, was self-made, a step which many artists take these days when they are dropped by major labels, but was unusual 30 years ago. You paid for the single yourself, Chris?
Yeah.
Did it actually make you any money?
No, it lost me a lot of money. With promotion and everything, I was really lucky at one point because it had gone to Pinnacle for distribution, and it looked like their warehouse had lost 700 of them. And I was thinking, well, I'm quids in here because, alright, I've only sold 300, but their warehouse has lost 700. So, that's great, innit? Because I'll get my money back. But, of course, sadly, they found them.
How much did you lose?
I must have lost about 10 grand doing that.
The single was a brief note of happiness for Tony, whose life thereafter spiralled down.
Because they knew he liked to drink, they started to sort of come round and say, "Well, I'll tell you what, if you come and play with us tonight, we'll give you 50 quid and as much beer as you want to drink on the way there and the way back." And And then he got into, when he split up with his girlfriend and moved into the house next door to her, then he turned to heroin, and he died, you know, of heroin and alcohol abuse. Very, very sad.
How old was Tony?
I think he was probably around 50 when he died.
How long was he a heroin addict for?
Probably about the last 3 or 4 years of his life.
Did you see him at that time?
He was playing a gig, and I went into the pub, and he was absolutely massive. Had a dirty jogging top on and dirty jogging pants, and he just drank pint after pint. He'd put his hand out to find out where his next pint of beer was. He'd put his hand in the top of the glass to make sure it was wet. Then he'd just take the pint and he'd just drink it down in one. He was just being like a circus monkey put there at the front of this band to perform, and looked so awful. His clothes weren't washed and he wasn't clean, and I just thought, you know, it's not nice.
The single I'm about to play is interesting because it looks much more professional than most of the others, with its full colour sleeve. If you wanted I Remember by Belladonna in 1982, it would have cost you 35 pence. The song was written by the band singer Mayra Shaw and was about her husband of the time.
And I met my husband because he was in New York in a play called The Man in a Glass Booth. And, you know, and a friend of mine from drama school took me to see him. And I've never seen acting like that. It was just incredible. So she introduced me to him, and that was it. We fell in love. He was much, 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 much older than me. 30 years older than me. I was very young.
I suppose we're going to have to name him, aren't we?
Yeah, Donald Pleasance.
When they first met, Donald had just played Dr. Blofeld in the Bond film You Only Live Twice.
I'd never seen any of his films. I didn't even know he was famous. All I knew when I saw him on stage on Broadway, I've just watched the most amazing performance. And I loved his talent. I fell in love with his talent. When I get to England, I realised he was famous, but not until then.
In my bag here, I've got the single. I wondered how you feel looking at it all these years on, and what emotions it stirs.
The emotion it stirs that it was my favourite house ever. Because this photograph is taken from the front room in my house. And I lived there for 17 years. And I loved it.
How old are you on this picture?
I never talk about my age, by the way. So I'm not going to tell you how old I am. So therefore I'm not going to tell you how old I was then. It's one thing I lie about.
This is you here,
yeah,
with the hat on, looking down.
Yes.
You're very young there, very beautiful. It's an artistic
beautiful.
You're still very...
Everybody tells me that I'm still beautiful, older lady, but really beautiful. It looks as if it's not me. To be quite honest with you, I sort of know it's me. This is why I look at my house, because the house is still there. So the house is very real to me, and us, much less real.
The song's about Donald, isn't it?
Sort of, yeah. It doesn't have to be about Donald. It's about somebody whom you had a love affair with, and you remember certain things, and you remember their lies.
Did he know it was about him?
No. He loved women. He absolutely adored women. What can you do? It was his nature.
After Belladonna split, Mayra set up a recording studio and managed several acts before becoming a clinical hypnotherapist.
By nature, I'm also a person who always looks into the future. I hardly ever look in the past. I sort of know it's there, and I'm looking at it and say, yeah. But I don't get sentimental.
But for those of us who do look back occasionally, like our old vocalist Jim Stringer, it's the sheer hard work involved in making your own record that stands out.
A 70 single shows that you're prepared to work, because it's not an easy process. You have to book a studio, record it, mix the recording, you got to find something to master it, then you've got to oversee the mastering, and then once the mastering's done, you've got to find a manufacturing plant and a distribution deal, and you've got to get sleeves printed, and you've got to get it into the shops. It's a hard process. It's a difficult, complex process, and it's a rite of passage that said at the time, we're serious because we've gone through this long, difficult birth.
One of the bands we befriended were The Wedding Present. They had launched their career with a self-funded single called Go Out and Get 'Em Boy, aptly named because what I remember best about their founder David Gedge was his incredible work ethic.
Yeah, the legend is that I lived off mashed potato for about a year. And, there's some truth to that, obviously.
You were very pale, weren't you, back then?
I probably was very pale, yeah. But it's the only way it could have worked, really, because we had no money.
Did you ever actually miss meals to pay for it?
I think there were times when I didn't have enough money to do a weekly shop, so I probably kind of missed meals and just went down to the local shop and got a pie or something. Yeah.
Did it ever dawn on you that was a bit crazy?
No, it seemed perfectly reasonable to me, to be honest. Yeah.
What about retrospectively as a grown up?
Well, yeah, because it's an ambition, isn't it? And you're obsessed with it, really. I probably still am, so I probably would go through it again if I needed to. But you have to make little sacrifices, and it wasn't I wasn't starving.
I've got the single here, and what does it bring to mind?
It's funny because I've been working on a series of reissues of Wedding Present records, and I had to get one of these out the other day, and it's so familiar to me because I remember because it was before the days of doing it on the computer, so all the text on the back was done with letter sets. You can see it's not exactly in a line, some of it. It's a bit jumbled
up. It looks quite
up.
Professional, though.
Does it? Well, that's good then. So that took a while getting
Are there
that
any
right.
mistakes on there?
I was looking there. There should be a space there, shouldn't there, between Charlie and Giles? I think that was a bit of an error. But then, it wasn't a space like on a computer nowadays. It was you just left a little bit of space when you were doing the letter set. So it's kind of an odd feeling because it's very familiar to me, and yet I haven't picked one of these up for quite a long time until this year. So
were you always aware of the aesthetic of record production?
Oh, totally, yeah. Which is why I think it's a bit of a shame these days with, you download a track off the internet, you don't really get this kind of visual... I mean, you do, because you can download images and stuff, but the fact that it's actually on the record, I think, is really nice, and it's just more direct, I think, somehow.
Yeah. Should we play it?
Stick it on.
There's only 500 copies of this, is that correct?
Yeah, be careful with that.
Oh, well. Unlike the vast majority of us who made our own records, The Wedding Present forged a 30-year career with numerous hit singles and constant worldwide touring. In short, something we all dreamed of. And it always seemed feasible when a few plays on John Peel and a decent review in one of the music weeklies could light a fire under a band.
It's not always enjoyable, really, I don't think. Like, you'll do a concert and come off stage and people say, oh, I bet you really enjoyed that. And I think, well, no, I didn't really, to be honest, because it was quite hard work and it was quite stressful, and I forgot the words of that song, and then that pedal broke, and I was worried about that bloke coming over the barrier. There's all these things running through your mind. It's actually quite a stressful 90 minutes, I think. But then I suppose, yes, the 22-year-old would have been happy with the kind of career out of it, really. So not having to have a normal job, but being able to live off, making music and playing concerts and stuff. So, yeah, I think it's been worth it.
What about the travel that it's brought?
Well, travel's a weird thing, isn't it? Because on the one hand, yes, it's a pain. I do spend a lot of the time of my life in airports and tour buses and hotels and stuff. But at the same time, people are, amazed at the number of places I've been to on the strength of being in the group, really. We travelled the world, really, on the strength of this. So, and that's been fantastic. The fact that I've met so many people and seen so many places for free. That's one of the perks, really.
It all sounds delightful, of course, but most of us didn't make it. Viv Savage, keyboard player and arch philosopher with Spinal Tap, said his aim in life was to have a good time all the time. At least we had a good time some of the time.
You're doing it because you just love to do it, and it's in you to do it, and so there's no failure as long as you carry on doing it and continue to develop, and you can express yourself and hopefully make a bit of a positive impact as you go along.
Some people don't even know I was in a band, but it's like a different life, and I'm glad it's a different life, because my life now is brilliant. But whatever I do, including the 7-inch that I'm holding in my hand of Belladonna, everything I've done in my life until this point brought me to this point.
If you've got an idea, just go for it and do it, and encourage everyone else. And I think creativity is really important for feeling happy. And whether you're doing music or you're doing some drawing or sculpture or whatever, I think if you can do something, spend some time doing something creative, I think it actually makes you feel happier.
When you see guys on the X Factor nowadays and they say, I want this more than anything, this is my dream, wanting it and dreaming about it, if you've got half an ounce of bloody gumption, you can just go and do it. That's what we did. We just got 4 mates who could play a few chords, who had something to say, and we just, you hustled us a few gigs, we hustled ourselves a single, we hustled ourselves on a radio one. You don't need Simon Cowell, well, you didn't need Simon Cowell to get those things. You can make it happen just off your own volition, really.
These days, it's easy for young bands to upload their songs onto a web page, but very few have a 7-inch piece of plastic, something tangible with longevity that can linger in the cellars of second-hand record shops and reach out to strangers many years later. Interestingly, most of the people who made their own records, like Matthew, Mayera and Brendan, have remained creative. Here's Chuck Warner again.
An outsized chunk of DIY performers seems to have ended up as writers or in education nowadays. There's a lot of reasons, I think, including a lifelong tolerance for genteel poverty and low wages. But the main thing is a continuation of the go and do it principle. There's this fundamental love of sharing their passion with other people and then encouraging them to go their own way with it.
Of the records I found, only one, Tony Crabtree's, led me to a sad story, but his short life was not without adventure.
Someone let him drive an ex-post office telephone's truck at 1 o'clock in the morning, totally blind, up the dual carriageway up Albert Royd Street. Another time...
Hang on, how far did he get?
He did about half a mile driving the truck.
Well, at least Tony had a van, unlike my band. If only. If only.